Hello and welcome to another Out of Spec Bits episode. Just as we predicted in this morning's episode, the Rivian R2 first full tour and first drive reviews have gone live. Colton, imagine going to review maybe the most exciting EV of the year and making a 5-minute video. That's crazy.
Yep, totally agree. I mean, that's literally an intro for us half the time. Like, that's crazy. How you review something in 5 minutes is pretty wild.
So that really sums up a lot of what we have learned from this initial covered drive, is how we would call it. It's basically very series representative vehicles, but still pre-series product, where Rivian invited a bunch of media to come and test and review the vehicle. And I would say we've learned a lot and nothing all at the same time.
That's a perfect way to put it. Yeah, I think we're taking away some interesting points here, but I kind of expected Rivian to push out a bunch more than I thought we would get from these first drives. But here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were some great videos that went up. Obviously, Doug is the master of the industry and just had a great quirks and features full tour, and I learned a ton from his video, and I thought that was really great. And I also want to give a shout out to my buddy Frank Marcus at Motor Trend, who's like not the nerdiest guy there, but is been in the industry for a long time and knows cars really well. And I learned a ton from his article, mostly about powertrain stuff that we were speculating on in the last episode. Frank was really the only one to dial a lot of that in for us. And so I'm so happy that Rivian invited him and that he was there to I think cut through a lot of the like surface level coverage that Rivian was probably hoping for and actually get to the like, what is the R2 and how is it engineered? And now we know. So if you haven't yet, Colton, I think just backing up, we made a whole driving dynamics analysis based off of watching the Rivian go through their development test stories. And I would say based off everything we analyzed from that review, we were dead spot on.
Yeah, which is hilarious. It was funny, your dad, after we stopped recording that, he was like, how are you guys like understanding the car dynamically by watching some clips? If you understand cars, you've been around them for a long time. Dude, we hit the nail on the head by like pretty much every single metric here, I think.
Yeah, I think what we didn't know, obviously, were what were the drive modes going to be. That we now know. But I think our speculations were on the money. We were talking about brake-by-wire. We were talking about front motor clutch disconnects. We were talking about how it looked really soft and compliant. And that's what the reviews are saying now, is it's got that sort of wafty feel. And I've got Frank's words pulled up to discuss there. So honestly, I would encourage everyone to go watch that video, because I think based off of everything I'm seeing, we looked pretty accurate on that stuff.
Yeah, totally agree. Some really cool stuff here too. This got me definitely more excited for R2 in general, but again, I'm just like, I want all of it now. And I know that's not how cars are released, but.
So should we run through what we know, or at least the specs that came out through all of this? Then I think we should run through our highlights of the changes, stuff that we're excited to learn. And then we'll sort of wrap up with not necessarily reviewing the reviews, because I think it's, all these people have great intentions and have big audiences and are catering to a mass market, sort of general viewer, not like EV nerdy like we are. So I think it's fair to understand everyone's place in the market. But with that said, I think I'm pretty happy with a lot of the coverage that we were able to get to see, considering the folks that were invited. So here we go. Price, that's the big thing we didn't learn today, dude. We still don't know how much this thing is going to cost. And usually when automakers do that, they are not excited to tell us how much it's going to cost.
Yeah, and I think that's the most concerning thing that I have about R2. I think this is such a price-conscious car. You have some very competitive vehicles coming out that are currently on sale and that are still to be coming out. iX3, EX60 as well, some other vehicles coming out. But, Model Y, this I think is going to be its main competitor. They really have to nail this on the head, but it seems like what we're getting is a launch edition, dual motor, all-wheel drive performance. And that's something I have a question on as well. Is this actually their performance variant? I would assume so.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems like the dream of the tri-motor's gone away, although Frank did say there was going to be higher trims and lower trims into the future, so maybe it will still come, but for sure, this is probably the easiest to engineer with highest margin vehicle to get out there. And that's, with the big software update probably for the motors to get the full output. And I'm just so happy again that based off of this 640-60 torque split, 60% in the rear, stronger motor in the back. These are all things we predicted from watching the car through the dynamics review. So I'm so happy about our previous coverage, I would say. Here's some things. We don't know what it's going to cost. No one speculated in all the reviews, by the way. Rivian may have asked them not to speculate. I think this thing's going to be $59,900. That's the number I'm throwing out there. If it's $54,900, that would be a value. But I think it's going to be every bit of 60 grand for the launch edition. What do you think?
For sure. I was going to say 60 grand all day, every day for this. If that goes above this, man, they made some serious mistakes with this car. I don't think it can eclipse 60,000. Like, it can't have a 61, a 62, 63 in there. It's got to be right at 60, I think, top.
Yeah, and I'd love to see that after destination and delivery as well. I think that would be really kind of cool. So we now know for sure, confirmed, it uses a permanent magnet front and rear motor. We also now know that they use the clutch disconnect on the front axle. Now, I am not a fan of clutch disconnects. I think they're slow, they're sloppy, they're hard to tune, and Rivian has done a terrible job of tuning their clutch disconnects in the R1 Enduro drive units. Now, Rivian also does the wrong motor on the R1. They disconnect the rear axle and make it run front wheel drive most of the time and then connect on the rear. And I end up driving our dual motor R1S in snow mode all of the time to lock it together, but still retain squishy suspension. I heard sport mode is going to be the new default one for that now coming up. You'll go squishy suspension in sport, but it always resets to all-purpose dynamic disconnects for the EPA numbers to show high. And it's just purely Rivian gaming the EPA system, which is, it is what it is. Combined power, big power deuce, 656 horsepower, 609 pound-feet of torque, 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds quoted by the manufacturer. Rocket ship numbers. I mean, no one is going to be complaining about that. That's pretty close to like Model Y performance almost numbers from their dual motor performance powertrain. I think even at 60 grand, that's a lot of power for the money.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they hit a good sweet spot there. I mean, the crazy thing is, we're just getting into an era where cars are so unbelievably fast. And the big point I want to make here as well is this thing is 2,000 pounds lighter than an R1S. Like, that is a serious less amount of weight you have to deal with dynamically on the suspension and just powertrain overall. And I think that'll also help having that rear motor being primary with front tire wear. That's been a big issue with R1 platform as well. So some really good things we're seeing here so far in terms of powertrain.
Yeah, here's the car and driver estimates. 3.6 seconds, 0 to 60, 12.75 mile. I mean, a car running 12s out the box. That's like a kind of off-roady small SUV. That's awesome. Top speed, concerningly slow.
Yeah, no Autobahn ripper here.
It's fine for our market. No one's going to really complain about that. I also live at a racetrack, so not a typical use case, but I do run into that 112 mile an hour limiter all the time in Rivians out here, but it doesn't really matter. That's fine. Here's the concerning thing. So manufacturer estimate says more than 300 miles of range on this trim. Now, all of the test vehicles were on an all-terrain tire or like a chunky all-season. There will also probably be a more roadworthy all-season tire that we've seen spotted on prototypes and stuff. My guess is you're not going to see as big of a range difference between those two tires as you would on the R1 line. Both are very similar diameter. They're not going with a real hardcore all-terrain. My guess is you're going to see a 3% difference between the tire choices. I don't think it's going to make or break a ton of maybe 5% at the most between the two tire changes. I don't think you're going to see a big difference between them.
Yeah, we were seeing, on the screen, obviously it's the guessometer on the cars, but you could kind of estimate between 310, 315 miles with the all-terrain tires on the test vehicles that they had, which seems pretty reasonable. I think most people don't actually need more than 300 miles of range. I think that's kind of like the starting point of when people are looking to get into a vehicle. It's like 300 miles, okay, we're good. Of course, I think we all want more, but I think that's a good, reasonable, especially at this price point, a bar they had to hit there.
Yeah, and we're talking EPA range. So this is a combined cycle. So really we're going to be looking at Rivian trying, because they did this with R1, trying to get the most range number they can on the box. And then we'll see how it performs in real world on the highway. But my guess is this is going to be a 250-mile-ish cruiser. If that 84 kilowatt hour battery pack or 86 kilowatt hour battery pack was spotted.
Yeah,
In one of the reviews.
87.4 is what Inside EV says, which
87.4.
I'm curious if that is gross or usable. Now, on ABRP, what we were speculating around 95 kilowatt hour for the large pack, I guess, a 7.5 kilowatt hour buffer does seem a little bit high to me, but Rivian's also kind of done that in the past, haven't they?
Yeah, and then they've opened up buffer in the future. The thing is, though, what I saw, and I think Jose tweeted about it. Let's see if I can find it on Rivian Tracker. He mentioned that it was a physical sticker on the vehicle, which would indicate gross capacity. And I thought he tweeted about it. Oh, yeah, this, 87.4 kilowatt hours. Maybe someone texted it to me. But it was literally a sticker on the car.
Interesting.
That showed that. Yeah.
Which actually kind of concerns me then, considering range numbers and doing the math of that seems a little tricky for efficiency wise. Again, I don't think this thing's going to be super efficient.
Yeah, it says battery information label, something, something, something. And then it was 87.4 kilowatt hours was a label on the vehicle. Minimum pack voltage, 240 volts. So that would be at 0%, which is, somewhere around there. So that is what I at least saw. And I won't say who texted it to me, but someone texted that to me. So that's scary. That would indicate gross capacity if it's a sticker physical label on the vehicle. So maybe it's like 82 usable, 85 usable. I don't know. That's the same as a Model Y.
Exactly. And meanwhile, you have, EX60, iX3, those are going to be way bigger battery packs than those.
So iX3 is just, let's just say it's 65 grand, because I think there's going to be a little bit of a price bump for that car. 112.2 kilowatt hour usable for 65 grand.
That's a huge battery. That's bigger than Model S, Model X. Like
that's bigger than an R1 large.
That's insane. That's really crazy.
So clearly this is a perfect car. Another friend of mine who I won't also mention, but works for a competitor automaker, was like, R2 looks amazing. Clearly it's going to be great for a single family homeowner. And I was like, it does not feel very adventurous forever, because the charging performance is also not very adventurous. 10 to 80% in 30 minutes. Here's the deal. I have seen so many people online yelling at me about how they don't care about charging. That's totally fine. You don't have to care about charging. You can charge at home and you can waste all your time sitting at charging stations. I don't know why that's your new favorite thing to do, but it seems to be a lot of people just love long charging stops. Here's the thing. If they made it charge faster, you could still sit there for 30 minutes. No one's saying you got to leave, maybe idle fees, but no one's saying you got to go. But it would give normal people who value their time that time back to get on the road to get where they need to go. So I don't know why faster charging would be a downside. We've not seen that transfer into more degradation. It's a choice in the cell to choose between an energy dense cell or a power dense cell. Power dense cells can take fast charging all you want with very little degradation. So it's really just a choice. And they made the choice based off of Model Y being like the best selling thing ever, charging in about 30 minutes, 10 to 80. And you know what? Most Model Y owners don't complain. All I'm saying is this is not pushing the industry forward when it comes to charging, which we've seen in China, crazy charging performance. But now Volvo EX60 for also the $60,000 version, which a bigger pack than this, that's 90 something kilowatt hours usable in the EX60 dual motor long range, 10 to 80 in 14 and a bit minutes. So
Yeah.
we're talking twice the charging time. We're not even like, 5 minutes. We're half the charging time for the EX60. That's a major competitive disadvantage that a lot of commenters say they don't care about, doesn't bother them, and that's fine. And you know what? I would be okay with it too, but I would not want this to be my only vehicle because of that charging performance, because I road trip a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those tricky things. I understand the arguments against it, but I also am like, why are we in 2026 here? A brand new, straight off the ground platform with a peak of 200 kilowatts, as claimed by, Top Gear. Like, that is just abysmal. Like, I'm sorry, but yeah, I don't know. It's pretty frustrating to me. It's, there, it seems to be, we're getting this divide of like companies really trying to push and then companies just like keeping it safe. And again, you go back to degradation. I mean, with Tesla, we've been seeing huge degradation. Meanwhile, cars that charge, twice as fast as those, higher C rates, all of that stuff, deeper into the pack, better charging curves, aren't having that much degradation. So I don't know. It's one of those things. I think we need to kind of push the industry forward. I understand the concept of it, but like you said, you can always charge for 30 minutes there. Like that top buffer on there or top charging takes so long to do.
Yeah, if you want longer time at charging stations, like you should be able to have that time, but you should also be able to get in and get out right away. So we won't harp on it. We'll do the charge test on the car. We'll do everything. But I think that's maybe the biggest disappointment from my side, because truly everything else looks great. The battery seems a little weak sauce. I hope they come up with a larger capacity one in the future. Honestly, if it can do 270 miles on the highway, that's what I'm looking for. I mean, I really would look for 300 on the highway, because the Model Y's 360 mile roughly EPA. This is going to be 40 miles less than that, I think, something like that.
I mean, Model Y is so unbelievably efficient too. And this is not even going to touch on the toes of that efficiency. There's no way.
But if you listen to, and I love Marquez, great, awesome tech reviewer, but he mentioned close to 5 miles per kilowatt hour in this car. And I just know that that's what all the Rivian investors are going to hit us with, because let's just be real clear right now. This is not a 5 mile per kilowatt hour car. It's not even a 4 mile per kilowatt hour car. Maybe if you're going downhill on a twisty road at low speed, yes, it can be efficient, and it certainly will be a lot more efficient than the R1S is. But this is not a 5 mile per kilowatt hour car. So I was just like, when I saw that in the review, I was just like, oh no, because that's going to be the comments we're going to have to deal with for the next 6 months.
Yeah, well, that's like us, driving up to the top of I-70, driving it down and go, look at this great efficiency, and taking those numbers. Like that's not how you do efficiency numbers at all.
Yeah, okay. I don't want to rag on anyone, because they all have their audience. They all did a great job. They all did their thing, but it's not our thing. And it just kind of is like, oh, I was looking for a bit more real information from this. So Coleton, well, before we get into the rest of these reviews and stuff, so those are the confirmed manufacturer specs right here. Should we go over to Jose's article? I think he did a really nice job just sort of covering the event and what happened. Rivian Tracker is a great source for finding Rivian information. So riviantracker.com, a friend of ours runs the site, and you can see he's linked to everyone's videos and things like that. So yeah, just a nice little roundup of the coverage, I would say. In terms of other stuff, Rivian has tweeted here as well. They said the wait is almost over. The first R2 variant featuring dual motor and all-wheel drive launches this spring. We'll share full details, pricing options, and more on March 12th. That's 4 weeks away. So we're a month away from learning more final pricing. And I think they're not telling us pricing like we mentioned earlier, because it's going to be pretty expensive. Should we talk about how it drives though, dude? Because there's some stuff that I saw here that I really want to discuss a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first thing that I noticed was, we discussed in our initial driving breakdown this morning in this morning's episode on this channel, was the possibility of a brake-by-wire system. And it seems as if that's been confirmed by Top Gear. They mentioned that there's quite a bit of off-throttle regen with multiple settings, but then also you can run low regen and still get the benefit with a brake-by-wire of added regen on the brake pedal. So that's great for efficiency. Model Y recently went to a brake-by-wire system. Mustang Mach-E, I think, has kind of been there. A few others have had it, Ioniq 5s, stuff like that. And the one problem with the brake-by-wire that Top Gear brought up was that it didn't feel natural. It didn't feel that great. Should we run to exactly what they said about it, though? Let
Yeah.
me pull up their thing.
I mean, been my experience with quite a few brake-by-wire vehicles is that they just feel slightly unnatural and just lacking, that feedback, and sometimes not even, simulating ABS through the pedal, which is weird.
Yeah, and I've gotten used to that, of course, because I drive a lot of new cars with brake-by-wire, but you'll hear it click away. So I just can't wait to see how they tuned this and how it feels, and I wonder if they're going to dial it in a bit more because there's a couple things to consider with brake-by-wire. The first is, of course, the brake force simulation. You want to make sure that your braking force is conducive with the amount of pedal travel and back pressure that you have. If there's an electrical failure, you want a plunger to push through to the hydraulic systems that are underneath. And then you also want to simulate ABS through the brake pedal to tell you, hey, you've reached the limit of braking forces. But then you also need to do brake fade sort of tuning. So like if you drive Model Y hard right now, the pedal stays the same and it's doing brake fade compensation up until the brakes catch on fire. So as a driver, you don't feel the degradation in braking capability. It's compensating that on the brake pedal. So I wonder if they simulate brake fade or if it's just always going to be, same pedal feel no matter what. Now, does that matter to the end user? I would say no, but to some drivers it will, and they should focus on that.
Totally.
The next thing is the front axle disconnect. We discussed this a little bit, but the front axle disconnect is confirmed. This is a rear primary axle vehicle, taller gear ratio in the back, which makes sense because it's going to be your highway cruiser. Typically, you'd put the shorter ratio in the rear for a little bit stronger acceleration. But they clearly chose to say, hey, maybe we'll take a couple tenths off 0 to 60, do a 10-to-1 ratio on the rear. And I think it's like 8 point something up front. And you'll basically have the strong motor out the rear to push you. The rear motor and front motor are two physically different motors. They're called Maximus. And I need to see if I can find right here. The front stator stack length is 85 millimeters and the rear is 125 millimeters. So it's a larger rear unit, which leads to a 60% power split at wide open acceleration to the rear. This is a metric that they can claim at partial throttle or claim they can maneuver around front to rear. And so, it's 8.8 to 1 up front and 10 to 1 in the rear. And you've got that torque multiplication aspect going on in the rear, actually. So, yeah, that actually seems like a really nice drivetrain split there, Colton.
I totally agree. What is your thoughts on the decision to do both permanent magnet motors, front and rear axle, instead of doing induction front?
The complication with the clutch disconnect, dude, I hate that. And the time it takes to respond. I was actually just with some Lucid chassis engineers up in Baudette at a proving grounds, and they can electrically connect and disconnect as they're pretty high voltage, so they can stop a lot of the back EMF from going in from the permanent magnet motors, and they just have tiny flux losses at that point. They essentially have like a 10 millisecond or less connection time. This is probably going to be 100 millisecond, 200 millisecond, connection time. And then if you get into a weird situation where you're slipping, then are they going to rev match to the correct angle? And right now, Rivian's proved that they can't do this for the R1 smoothly. And so I'm just hoping they get it right here, because the last thing you really want to have is have a disconnect or have a connection moment when the front motor isn't spun up enough and it can kind of, grab the front tires. So I'm just hoping they dialed that in. I'm sure they have, but it's the right one to connect at least.
Because that's been a big complaint on R1. I mean, you just drive down the highway, just add partial throttle, and you just audibly hear and feel this thunk in the rear of the vehicle. It just feels awkward, and it doesn't feel like a premium experience whatsoever.
Yeah, so I noticed this vehicle has all-purpose and a conserve drive mode. So the drive modes are all-purpose, conserve, sport, and
seemingly off-road. And I also saw Top Gear say snow mode.
Okay, maybe snow. And then there's maybe different off-road drive modes that no one really went into to cover. But the question is all-purpose going to be all motors all the time? And is conserve going to be dynamic disconnect?
Oh, that's a good point.
So it might just start in conserve mode, which would make sense.
Right.
And then you can choose all purpose as you go.
Yeah, but that's I didn't even think about that because that's different. Because normally conserve mode slams the suspension for aerodynamic, but you don't have air suspension on this.
Well, and the dual motor Rivian R1s don't have conserve mode. All purpose is the conserve mode.
Interesting.
It's only the tri and quad that do it. And so in the tri and quad of the new generation, the conserve goes to the dynamic automatic clutch disconnect and reconnect, and all purpose is both motors in all the time. So I wonder if that's just a prototype thing because they didn't want people to experience the dynamic connection yet. No one mentioned how it felt. They just said that it's there.
Right. And Marquez also said in his review, he said, I'm going to put it into sport mode to get both both motors spun up and locked on there. So
Okay.
yeah, that's interesting.
So yeah, I don't know what the difference between an all-purpose and a conserve would be from a powertrain calibration standpoint. Because to get the EPA numbers, you'd want to be in two-wheel drive mode as much as possible. And that I would think would be conserved. The other item that it could be is conserve mode is just only rear drive. And it will just never bring in the front motor even if you mat it. So we'll have to play around with it, but I wasn't there to test all the nerd stuff. So we'll have to wait and see for another day and see how that all goes. What else did we want to discuss? Let's see. We're discussing the modes. We don't know about off-road driving. I think the biggest thing that we were concerned about was the suspension tuning on the whole vehicle. And I wanted to really make sure that this had yes, we know it's going to be soft and light dirt road capable. Yes, we know that it's going to be fairly sporty, especially from watching it drift around in their development stories. We wanted to make sure that it was going to have that typical wafty, nice ride quality. And it sounds like it is. Frank mentioned here in his review, I can go up. Also, shout out Frank, it is great. Let's see. He's talking about a lot about how the suspension is set up. We already discussed it's using a very more basic suspension setup. It's using Monroe semi-active shocks. It's a single valve adjustment on the damper, so you have ride feel set to soft, medium, or firm. It's just a single valve tuning controlling both compression and rebound inside the same damper settings right there. And he did mention somewhere in his review that it actually wafted, and I really liked that. Liked what he was saying about that.
And R1S kind of has that waft in it as well, and super soft suspension.
Waft gently. That's what it needed to do. It needed to be a great on-road daily driver. It can't be, upset by potholes and stuff. You need to have one of the engineers, Max, who we discussed in the previous one, gave a quote to an article, to an outlet that said there's a one and done moment where you hit the bump and there's no more body motions. And in the R1, there's a lot of body motions, especially the R1S. You hit a bump and you're still feeling that thing, absorb all of that afterwards. So seems
Totally
better,
agree.
actually.
I also want to say one thing on, sport mode and putting it into firm here. I think this is going to be more fun to drive slightly hard than the R1s because you and I both know you only get full power in R1s because of the air suspension in full slammed mode, and then it rides like an absolute dump truck in that. Yes. And it's not that enjoyable to drive like that. This, you're going to get full power in sport mode, and it's still going to ride pretty darn nice, I think.
It's a good point. I was just in my Rivian giving a sighting lap. We have some Porsche guys here doing some laps at the track today, and they're like, can you show us the line? And, R1's very capable. He was in a GT4 RS, and I walked him in my Gen 1 Rivian full of stuff, by the way. But he was like, damn, that thing's fast. I'm like, you should see the new quad motor has another couple hundred horsepower. But he, dropped a wheel off the track, to cut an inside curb. I kind of felt bad because I shot some dirt on his car. But he was going quick. And it like my head hit the roof. I was like, oh, there's no suspension absorption on this thing when you slam it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable when you get that thing dropped down in like full launch mode. Like has zero compliance. It's just, it's crazy. Yeah.
So this is actually going to have quite a bit of compliance in its most sporty setting. And it looks like it's going to be a hoot to drive. I mean, other than the Squircle steering wheel, I hate squared off wheels. Wheels should be round. I hope someone comes out with a round steering wheel aftermarket for this thing because I hate the little flat top looking. Let's see if I can find a photo of it. I don't know if Frank put any in his article. No. Where can we find some good
Probably on
here?
X, I would assume. Yeah, there you
This.
go.
I hate that so much.
Yeah, the problem is there's going to be no aftermarket support with those complicated scroll wheels they have on there.
Those scroll wheels look amazing. A lot of reviewers spent a lot of time talking about them, and I've felt them. I've used them before. They're incredible. I absolutely love the user interface with the central display using those, and the customization options in the future are amazing. It's honestly genius. That is the freaking best user input I've ever seen with a vehicle. What do you think, Colton?
Yeah, I'm really excited about them. And I think this is, we'll get into it a little bit more, but you're starting to see Rivian become a very clever manufacturer, and they're really having to cut costs down with this, but they're also cutting costs and improving things in certain ways. And this, I think, is a great example of that, because buttons all around vehicles become very expensive. I always really love watching Sandy Monroe, and they go through a deep dive and talk about, how much each component costs. And R1, they were like, they are spending so much money in the wildest places on R1. And this is a good exercise here. I'm really excited to play with them. I haven't been able to feel them like you have, but yeah, the infinite adjustment of availability and the options you can do, big thumbs up from me on those.
Yeah, so it seems like software looks great. Feels like it looks pretty stable, and I guess really to round out the coverage of everything, because I don't want to make this go on for forever. We'll have to wait until we can really do a deep dive on one of these. That clearly was not the purpose of the Rivian event that they held. This was more of a, I don't want to say fluff piece, because I feel like we did learn many notable things about it. For example, the rear windows don't pop out anymore. It's just the sliding rear glass in the back, which is really cool. I thought Doug, like if you had to watch one video, I think Doug did a great job just covering the car and just mentioned it drove fine, which is kind of the point. Like it just needs to drive better than a RAV4 or a CRV or a Model Y and give you a little bit of adventurous feeling and capability, and then you're fine. And it does that.
I totally agree. And there's some, interesting points I think we pulled out from a lot of these. One thing I was noticing looking at all the photos and videos, there's no ultrasonic sensors on here. So that makes me wonder, how are they going to do, parking control? Because R1 has all had that. They've got just a bunch of like very small little changes, cutting cost again. So I'll be curious to see how they implement that in the production variant of the vehicle. And even like just buttons to open up the rear glass is a haptic button, and especially on the front trunk as well, also haptic, which is going to be interesting to see with snow and ice, how those are going to work.
It will not work.
Nor will the rear wiper. The rear wiper looks like an absolute mess to me. I think that's going to be a big problem.
Okay, we'll definitely see. I heard a bunch of drains through there, and I just kept thinking that's all going to get clogged up.
Yes.
But they're smart too. Like obviously, if we're thinking it, their engineers are thinking it, and hopefully they don't just not engineer solutions to those problems. Maybe there's heating elements where the buttons are. We just don't know. It's still too early. So I say at the end of the day, the sentiment around the car, the general sentiment is it drives softer and more comfortable than expected. It uses really good brake-based torque vectoring when off-road to get you through obstacles, which is a key notable attribute that it needs to have. It has a lot more fun drive modes, a little more of a drifty character than maybe it even needs for the general consumer, because it still has to have that brand image, that Rivian sporty, adventurous DNA. The battery feels a little bit weak in terms of capacity, considering adventurous forever, but potentially there leaves room for a real max pack variant in the future I would like to see. And the charging is really the only major weak point that I can see from all of this, that 10 to 80 in 30 minutes. That's not to say it's undrivable. I mean, we're talking not the end of the world here. It's just a little compromise for the few charging stops a year that most people are going to take. If you have apartment charging, if you don't have charging, you live in an apartment, you rely on public charging, that's where it could get annoying. If you road trip a ton, that's where it could get annoying. But at the end of the day, I think if that's the only thing that we're not loving about this, I think they still nailed it and found the correct compromises here, Colton.
Yeah, again, I think it comes down to price on this. We're going to know exactly in, 4 weeks and 2 days, as Rivian said. And I think that's going to be, a big discussion point. That is the really only thing. I mean, I think the battery, honestly, for 99% of the population is fine. You and I and all of us nerd viewers would, of course, prefer to have more, and push the industry along. I still think it's a shame we're here in 2026 now with a 2027 model year vehicle with this kind of charging curve, but it is what it is. It's a cost cutting measure essentially. And yeah, I'm excited for this. This again got me a lot more excited for the vehicle, slightly more nervous for the vehicle. So we're just going to have to wait and see now. And yeah, I think this is going to be a really, really cool vehicle for Rivian.
Yeah, can't wait till we can get one here to the out of spec track. That'll probably be the next time that I feel like I'd like to drive it, is like when it's here and we can really just dig into everything. So whether that's when we buy ours or there's maybe another opportunity, not sure, but I'll definitely be doing all the nerd videos. And it sounds like almost no competition in our review space. No one really did a video close to how we would. So that's probably a good thing. And I think we've got our own lane. Everyone that asks for shorter videos, guess what? Y'all got them. So thanks so much for watching another Out of Spec Reviews video on how the R2 drives. The reviews are in. They seem positive, and the big unknowns are a little bit scary, especially relating to price and official range figures. But I'm not expecting great numbers from either of those. Otherwise, Rivian would have been leading with those numbers in the communications. Thanks for watching. See you in another one again soon. Bye-bye.